Hello, today I'm going to be talking to you about sitemaps, and hopefully this is one of those things that isn't actually common knowledge, because I can never seem to discern what is common knowledge and what is not. I spent the longest time even getting into my career because I was convinced that everyone just knew about all the digital marketing stuff I knew, and that's not true. So now I would like to share some of it with you. Like, sitemaps, I think, is one of the things where you hear the word in discussion and then most people in the room think that they can discern what it is from context, so no one ever actually asks, and then everyone around you is just talking about slightly different concepts. I have seen sitemaps, and I'm like, yeah, that looks realistic. That's what I thought a sitemap would be, but I didn't really understand the purpose of it or what the point of making one was. And then only recently, after obsessively diving into Google Search Console, did I learn that there are even multiple types of sitemaps. And as someone who is actually really interested in SEO, it was bugging me that I knew something was so simple and I knew how to create one, but I never really knew how to describe one properly. So I've done a deep dive into the nuance between different kinds of sitemaps, because there are different kinds and I didn't even know that initially, and now I can tell you all about it. Now, the term sitemap is pretty much interchangeable no matter what context you're using it in, but they all do have very specific names, and I'm going to use those very specific names so we can differentiate them throughout the video. So the first sitemap, the one most people probably know about, is called a site architecture map. Now, these are the sitemaps that are made before even web design concepts and web development begins. It's more based on UX and the user journey. They're used as tools so the web designers can actually plan out how the website's going to look, because they need to know what pages they're going to need. They include all private and all public pages, so even ones where the admins might have to log in the back end so staff can use an online booking tool, for example. That is included in the site architecture map. When I had my first iteration of my first ever version of my website made, I actually got I tried to do what actually ended up being a site architecture map, but because I didn't know enough about web design at the time, because I was just a videographer at that time, then I had no idea what to include in it. So my first website was so bare bones that my web designer must have been so confused and thought, maybe what's even the point of it? Like, some websites are single pages, and that's when you don't necessarily need one of these, but pretty much every website will have more than one page, because there's back-end stuff that you want to work out, or even a terms and conditions page. Because I didn't know what I was talking about, it's common practice for the client to provide their drawing of a site architecture map, and it normally looks like a bit of a flowchart. I'll see if I can find a good example one to stick in the video. Normally, the client will provide one, and then the web designer can actually suggest more stuff to flesh it out, which mine did a little bit, but because I hadn't really quantified the purpose of my website for my business, I just knew that you needed a website to have more credibility as a business. My web designer couldn't really make many recommendations on that one. I didn't even know the difference between pages and posts at the time, so I had a page for this sort of gallery, a page for landscape photography, a page for photojournalism stuff. And originally they were made by my web designer as posts, which are blog posts, but there was no text content in the blog posts. They would have been really ineffective blog posts for SEO. And then over time I changed them to pages, and then it was a whole big thing. Eventually, in the end, I completely I want to say I scrapped my website. I did not scrap my website. I kept pretty much as much of the design elements as I initially needed from the web designer when I learned how to build my own website in Elementor, but I had to literally construct it from the ground up when I made it in Elementor, which is what I use for my website right now, because I wanted to be able to edit it myself with a few drag and droppy elements, because I'm not a developer, so I can't do coding, and the majority of my original website was some edited themes here and there, but there was a lot of raw code included, so it was not possible for me. But remember, when you're doing your site architecture map, you can segment them for different things. It doesn't need to be one continuous flowchart, but normally it'll be the home page, and then the menu will sort of branch down. And that's sort of how you can think about it, is you're building your own menu in your mind, but it includes all the stuff that the public won't be able to see as well. The login page, the booking page, the calendar page, the service select page. And then think of it if you had an e-commerce website, then the shop would be the main shop homepage, and then you've got a homeware category, clothing category. And in the clothing category, maybe you've got the coats, the shoes, the bags. But in terms of web architecture, you wouldn't go down to the individual product listings because product data will be put through a single product template. Like, you wouldn't go down to the individual product level and list every single product you have on your website, because not only does the person making the site architecture map maybe not know about every product that's going to go on the website, but the actual web page is made for your template, and then it's dynamically populating all the product data into that template. So for your architecture page, you would maybe put the different categories you intend to have, which will also have their own template, but you could say this would be the category template, and then we need to also make a individual product page template, and then another branch of the shop tree would be, we need the checkout, or we need the basket page, we need the checkout page, we need the your payment is complete process page, and then an order history is another example. And those aren't private pages, but they're sort of not going to be in the menu. So a site architecture page is absolutely every page you're going to need on the website built at all. So the second kind of a sitemap is a user navigation sitemap, which is also sometimes called a HTML sitemap. So this is something that's used only on the front end and is to help users navigate the website a bit more easily. Some people sometimes assume that the navigation menu that might be like a drop down or in your header is interchangeable with this HTML sitemap, but it's a little bit different. So, okay, so I'm on my website here. This bit isn't publicly visible because I'm in the admin mode right now, but this is my sitemap page for my HTML sitemap on my website. It doesn't inherently show up unless you type in the URL div.digital.com/sitemap. Some people choose to link it in the footer, and I may do that in the future, but if I just go down to the bottom, you'll see that my footer isn't really designed to have a lot of cluttered stuff in there like some people do, which is totally an option thing. I use a plugin called All-in-One SEO, and because sitemaps are a part of technical SEO, which is an SEO string not many people really talk about a lot of the time. Most people don't really know about these HTML sitemaps. So my All-in-One SEO plugin has an option to automatically generate a HTML sitemap, and because of my template structure on my website, it's inherited the form of a blog post. So it's got the sidebar here that I would normally have on the blog post with the email list submission, with my share on social buttons, with my ad section, and then it's got the breadcrumbs here. So you know how to find it if you're still looking. And it segments it out into posts, and then these are all hyperlinked to all the posts that are currently on my website, and then different pages. So you can see the parent page and the sub page for my different pages. And you can see I've got all the different galleries I've created for photography is included in there. The contact page, about the owner page. These are all publicly visible pages, so you can find them on the website if you tried without being an admin. Then we go down to products, and it lists all the individual different products I sell, and then the categories. This is blog post categories, and then these are blog post tags. These are all the tags I've used in various blog posts, but then we go down here and we've got product tags as well, so it separates these out because WordPress considers products and posts to be different, even though product listings can be considered a type of post. It's a really long tag. But sometimes tags can be like full sentences, but I tend to keep them to shorter words. And it counts it like a blog post, so it goes to my most recent blog post as the previous button. But this is the sort of thing where if someone wants to find a very, very specific subject matter and it wants to know that it's on the website, then people can go to the sitemap. I do have the search function, so people might just, because that's in the menu, people might search and try and find something via the search tab because that's on the menu and it's not as a part of the drop down, because you see the drop downs don't go to like individual category level and different tag levels. The shop goes to categories. The blog does have categories, but the category menu is within the blog, so it sort of displays like that instead, but it doesn't go down to tag level. So say if I search something and I wanted to search let's go photography, then everything that's to do with photography shows up. So there's my actual photography page, and then these are blog posts that are to do with photography, and then these are products that are to do with photography. I haven't a tag description for photography, so it doesn't come up with anything here, which is a templated section, but this is how it would display. It's taken on my blog template because I haven't got a search page specific template. So I quite like how this one looks. I don't have a real problem with this displaying this way. But if you want to see a HTML sitemap, it will specifically maybe not look like this, but it will include all these sections. So this is more for a user to read. It's basically a way of maintaining a deeper hierarchy within a menu structure. So like, even though this up here could be considered, well, this is a drop-down menu. If all of these drop-downs just appeared via one massive block and it was all visible at one time, that would be considered a mega menu. And some people say that mega menus are the same as site navigation menus, but a site navigation menu does refer to this down here, which is the HTML sitemap. Generally speaking, you don't need HTML sitemap for every website. There are a lot of microsites that are like single page scroller websites where everything is visible at once, because HTML sitemaps only mention public pages. It only has one single public page. You don't need a sitemap, but they are very good at helping with stuff that is highly segmented. Like my website has the stuff for people who want to get services. So this describes the services I offer. The people who want to learn stuff with the free content I promote on my blog. The people who want to buy my services in a more pre-formatted, less customized way can get them through digital services on my shop, or they can buy products that I offer both digital and physical. Then there's also a means of checking all the user backend stuff, which is heavily linked to the shop, but also to do with commenting on the blog. And then this is like about the owner, and contact us are just things that every website should really have to have a bit more credibility. But the sitemap wouldn't be necessary for something that is just, this is our stuff, this is what we do, give us a call. Or sign up to our email list, people who basically have a landing page. The final type of sitemap is the one that really got me digging into the different types of sitemaps initially and sent me on a bit of a whole dig around on this. These are called XML sitemaps, and they're the ones that you submit to search engines like Google, Bing, Ecosia, or even DuckDuckGo, or whatever, search engines, so that your content can be indexed and found accurately on search engines. Now, people sleep on Google Search Console. People know all about Google Analytics, and there was the whole big controversy of, oh, we're getting rid of Universal Analytics in GA4. I would say that Google Analytics is for tracking overall activity and user behavior on your website. But if you want to find out how people come to your website through search specifically, then you need Google Search Console, which is shockingly related. Because a lot of people will assume that you can only really get traffic through means of social media nowadays, but organic search is still, like, it's the most prominent way of I get people to my website. It's got more longevity. Like, if someone misses when you post on social media, it's kind of gone to the ether forever, and you hope the algorithm spits you out a couple months later. A great way of repurposing content is you get your social media content, like a long form video, turn it into a blog post that is search engine optimized, and then you can embed the video within the blog post to recycle your social content, and then you still have written content to fill up your website and populate it, which increases your website authority, which makes you more visible on Google Search. So Google Search Console is how you track your progress on actual search engines. Okay, so this is Google Search Console. Let's go to the overall thing. Not gonna lie, my statistics for my specific website are not even that good. I spent a lot more time working on client websites, so I've been working with like hundreds of thousands of impressions and clicks and all that on my client and employers' websites, but I've never really spent that much time focusing on producing content for my own until recently. So these numbers are small potatoes, but if we go across a longer period, I like to keep it at 3 months because that's generally like the minimum period it takes for activity to actually affect what happens in your search results. But if I just show you the impressions and how my impressions have shot up over recent times since I've started actually trying to work on it, then that's the sort of thing you can track with Google Search Console. Clicks have become more consistent, although not as aggressively, like much better, but you see. Average click-through rate is like your impressions divided by the amount of clicks you get, I think, and then average position. So it's pretty much 10 search results for each page on Google. So if you're within the first 10, then you're on the first page. Average search position, though, can fluctuate. So some days you appear on the first page, some days you appear on the 8th page, and that's all down to the individual search. And then down here you get like what query did someone make, what page did they land on, the country they were in, the device they were in. This is stuff to do with Google Merchant Center more than anything, and then the specific date, and you can filter by all these things. But that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the sitemaps. So XML sitemaps. It took me forever to even be bothered to try and do this, and it takes about 10 minutes if you've got your website set up in something like all-in-one SEO like I do, because it automatically generates the sitemaps for you. Basically, Google can only show a result if there's a page for it on your website. So I'll show, these are the pages that I have indexed, these are the pages that I don't have indexed. You don't want every page indexed, you really don't. Sometimes there's stuff that you don't want people to see. There was a custom packaging provider and they had a tool that allowed you to build your own box with custom dimensions, and it was a nightmare when we realized that every single thing that a customer was creating for their own personal business use was being visible on Google. It's not private client information per se, because it's based off templates and drop-down options, and people can accidentally create the same box to the other person, and that's like, you can't own that individually because it was with a proprietary tool anyway. But there's also the factor that Google Search Console can only process so many URLs at once. So if you're eating up the data with stuff that you don't want to be visible anyway, then the stuff that you do want to be visible will get deprioritized. It's good that Google knows that you have more pages, because the more pages, it sees you having more content and updating content more regularly, but you don't want every single page to be visible. So you can see around here is when I've inputted my XML sitemaps finally. So right now there's a huge chunk of not indexed content that needs to be caught up on, but it's slowly doing that. It updates maybe every 4 days, I've noticed, and then it seems like it backdates for the previous 4 days as if it did it anyway. That's just how the data shows up. And then you can see that there was a little spike in my impressions shortly after I submitted my sitemaps, and now it's there's obviously fluctuations no matter what you do, but now it's a little bit more steady. So if we go to our sitemaps, the way you get XML sitemaps is, okay, I'm not perfect, don't come for me for my updates, but if you go on to All-in-One SEO here, and then you go down to the sitemap section, now here's general sitemap, so open sitemap, and this is the URL for something I have in Google Search Console here called the sitemap index. So this is a map of all the maps that you have. So how Google Search Console works, basically, it finds a URL. That URL is a page. The page will only be indexed and findable as a Google search result after it has been discovered, crawled, and then indexed. So crawling is like the bot that reads the page to find out what data is on it, and then you can index it. It means it's been segmented. People can search for something to do with dogs and you'll come up under a search result for dogs. It can only do it after it's been through those stages. So a sitemap helps the bots find every single page to discover it, and then it can start going through the process of cataloging the information and categorizing what your website actually provides and what your website is useful if someone were to make a query about something. So the sitemap index helps it find all your other sitemaps if you don't want to submit them individually. I have submitted them individually, as you can see here, and then you've got ones for all different types of things. So we've got like your sitemap categories, your pages, your posts. An RSS feed is slightly different. It is something that automatically updates. So I have an RSS feed that feeds into my Pinterest, for example, and then you can also have a bunch of different news apps. They're normally RSS feeds, and every time something is posted in a certain way on the website, as a blog post for mine, for example, then it generates something in your RSS feed to automatically share it to everywhere that accepts this feed. So the RSS feed will always tell Google when I have a new post, but it will also show up in the post category sitemap as well. So you're hitting it from all angles. You want Google to build connections between different pages on your website and different pages on other people's websites too. If there's not a link to it somewhere on the internet, then Google isn't going to be able to find it unless you tell it about it. I did do a bit of an experiment, and I tried to see if it would register my HTML sitemap in the Google Search Console index, but it was like, no, error, it's a HTML sitemap. So Google knows the difference too. This one for the MRSS, this was when I started trying to work out if all websites automatically create these things, or if you have to actually get someone to build it for you. In this instance, All-in-One SEO plugin is building it for me. I can't just type in a URL and hope that a sitemap exists for it. It has to have been built for me. So because I don't pay for the premium version of my plugin, it doesn't allow the MRSS sitemap, which is like a news sitemap. So if you want to show up in the news tab of Google, you need to have actually a news sitemap. Even if my blog post is like recent about today's events, it doesn't know that. So if you don't have a plugin or your CMS, your content management system, which is like the thing you build your website on, if your CMS or a plugin doesn't produce sitemaps for you automatically, you will actually need to get a developer to compile them for you. It's kind of wise to have a developer to check your sitemaps to make sure it's actually accurate, and it's if there are non-canonical URLs that actually don't match up to what you want it to display as on Google search, then that's where you sort of need to get a developer to go into the code and change it. But I'm not paying for that in my current place in my business because it's not a priority for me to pay for it, and I'm quite happy with how it's functioning as it is. So you decide how important it is to you if your sitemaps are displaying inaccurate information. Google can actually choose in itself to override your canonical URL. Like if you have some slightly duplicate content, it will choose which one to prioritize, and you kind of can't control that because it's Google's standards, but this is your recommendation to the search engine. You can also submit them to all your other search engines, but I have made no effort to do that because I think like 90% of the internet search traffic goes through Google, so the rest are just extras, and I don't feel like it's worth the sunk time for me to go into Bing and create an account and do all my sitemaps for Bing, which have to be processed slightly differently, I think. It's a good start. Now, if your sitemap does include pages that you actually don't want to be indexed and visible on search, but you can't go into it to edit it, then there are ways of adding a no index tag onto certain pages. That is getting a little more complex in terms of the back-end work in your CMS, but I found a few tutorials and it's really not that hard to learn how to implement a no index tag as long as you are quite cognizant of what different things you've plugged into your website. WordPress lives and dies off plugins. Most people, unless you want just a blog to post content with words, then you will probably have a plugin for WordPress, but it's designed to have a massive plugin library, but you have to be aware of how they all interact. So if you want to start inputting stuff into like the head and foot codes of your pages, then you need to be really careful that you don't accidentally break it and make sure you don't no index your whole site, because that would be terrible. Now, the good thing is if you're not entirely sure about if these things exist for you, then you can pretty much go into Google Search Console and it pre-fills your URL that you've associated with your Google Search Console, and then you can put in your URL, and then normally it's /sitemap.xml, and that will be your sitemap index. So if you're not sure if it exists, you can put that in and test it out. Now, some people will create separate image sitemaps because a lot of websites now are very rich media content heavy, and your metadata, your stuff like your alt text that you put to describe an image, or your caption, or maybe the source of a video, for example, like all these rich media things. Most people will create an image sitemap. All-in-one SEO plugin that I use, it actually automatically includes all images in the individual sitemaps. So a page of a lot of images will have the image data on the sitemap included, but some people will separate out the images entirely. That's particularly useful for my photography page. Annoyingly, there are a lot of images on my website that I forgot to put metadata in, so they'll probably just never show up in Google image search unless I go back and completely do the minutia of it. I accept I'm probably not going to do that for everything. I'm focusing on picking out better, newer content that's not repetitive, as opposed to optimizing on my old content, because I did briefly fall into that trap. If you do have a separate image sitemap, then that lessens the risk of Google skipping over the images that you've created. If you're determined to be like the first page Google search result, then make sure you filled in every single piece of data and that appears on your sitemap. If you have filled in all the data fields on the image and you have an automatically generated sitemap through a plugin, then it will likely include it in the other sitemaps as opposed to an image sitemap. All-in-one SEO that I have, it will also create an author and a date sitemap for you, which like obviously just segments out based on the date you posted or who posted it. So if people are searching for a specific author, then it'll show up as content produced by that author, and that's good. But you have to actually go into the back end and toggle it on. Like if you go through the sitemap section here, I'll show you. Like I've enabled my sitemap index. I've put 1,000 links as the limit on a sitemap, but if I ever hit 1,000 links, I'll probably increase it, but that's the recommended amount, is just have a lot of it. Include all post types, include all taxonomies, which are like data fields that fill it out, so provide as much data as you can, in my opinion. And then you have to turn on author and date sitemapping. Here are some extra fields that you can put in if you want to exclude something that might get you. For example, Google doesn't like content about like adult subject matter per se, unless you're really searching for it. And then also stuff about like drugs, for example, or any inappropriate content to do with maybe promoting eating disorders. Then if you want to exclude that to protect your website's authority, then you can put that in here as a field. Exclude images, no. I don't know why you would exclude images unless, again, inappropriate content. If you click through here, then we've got RSS sitemap. So this actually doesn't open it because I don't have an app for it, but I managed to go here and then copy the URL and pasted that into my Google Search Console and it accepted it, as you can see, because I've got RSS on there. Video sitemap is a premium feature, but I only embed videos that are hosted on YouTube anyway. If you go into your YouTube studio, then you can actually see that a lot of my traffic on some of my more popular videos is coming through Google search. So although it's not inherently associated with my website, which I'm a little gutted about, it does actually feed the data in, and my YouTube feeds back to my website anyway, so I get traffic through my description links. So stuff like that is great. New sitemap, again, not included. HTML sitemap, which is a back move, but you can see that you can choose the format of it to dynamically populate from there as well. So hopefully now you know a bit more about different sitemaps and the purposes of them, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe to see more content like this in the future.